My name is Maximilian Campbell, and today I'm going to talk to you about freedom. I'm going to have a little clip of Aretha Franklin singing things so freedom, freedom, freedom. And be a nice little way to start the video. So I'm going to talk to you about how our freedoms are being taken away, and if you don't do something about it, or if you wait too long to do something about it, it'll be too late. And so to do that, to convince you to take a stand for freedom, first we're going to talk about what freedoms that we have. So then we're going to talk about how and why freedoms would be taken away, and we'll look at examples of when freedom has been taken away and what has happened as a result of that. But first, we have to define what freedom is. So, what is freedom? A lot of people would say that freedom is being able to do what you want. But, and that sounds pretty great. If what I want to do is I want to go get an ice cream, I should be able to go get an ice cream. I should have the freedom to do that, right? But if what I want is to run people over with my car, that is not freedom. And so being able to do what you want, not freedom, it's power. Let's make a distinction between them. And so that's not freedom. What is? Well, some people would say that freedom is when you're not being forced to do something. And that sounds pretty good too. If I want to go get ice cream and someone says, no, you can't get ice cream, I would be not free to get ice cream. But if I go and I get ice cream, then I would be pretty free, right? But if I have no money to get ice cream, I'm not free to have ice cream. And so we need to take that, and what that really is the absence of coercion. It's when no one's forcing you to do something, is liberty. And so freedom is this intersect between power and liberty. And we need to balance between those and find that sweet spot where we have the most freedom while having power and liberty. Oh crap. Let's just go to this slide when I talk about power. Okay, so now we're going to talk, so now that we have kind of defined what freedom is, despite the fact that it is something that's really abstract, we should move on to what freedoms we have. And so one freedom we have is the freedom of speech. And as Americans, it's a freedom that's guaranteed in the Constitution. And it should be a freedom that every human being has, but unfortunately that's not the case. So, what is the freedom of speech? Speech, on that spectrum of power and liberty, speech gives you a moderate amount of power and a moderate amount of liberty. You can say what you want, and that gives you power because you can influence other people. You can spread ideas, you can spread political messages, you can spread feelings of hope and good feelings, or you can spread radical ideologies. And so that gives you a lot of power somewhere else. You can also use speech to intimidate people. You can use the threat of force to intimidate them into doing something that you want to do. You can have power over them. But another power that it gives, and so you can also have liberty with the First Amendment. And so you get liberty because you have liberty because you can speak out, and it's very hard to stop free speech. Free speech isn't some object that can be taken away. It's this intangible idea where it's speech, and especially in this day and age where we have so many media to distribute speech, internet, TV, to just name a few, in this day and age, the ability to distribute speech is above and beyond what it ever has been in the past. And so free speech is holds, but he's consistently placed it as what Americans believe is our most important freedom and definitely our best freedom. But let's move on to one that is a bit more controversial. right to bear arms. Now, the thing with the right to bear arms is it gives you a lot of liberty, but it also gives you a lot of power. You have power over other people if you choose to do that. If you decide that you're going to take your gun and you're going to shoot someone, you've just you've used power over them. If you decide to threaten someone with the use of your gun and saying, do what I say or I will use force against you, that's power over them, which is what government is, but I'll talk a little bit about that later. And so you have a lot of power over people, and that's one of the reasons why people say, well, we need to make sure that that power is in the hands of people who are responsible for it. But it also gives you a lot of liberty if you own a gun. It's very hard for people to exercise power over you, because you can say, I'm not going to listen to what you say. I can defend myself. Whatever threats of force you have against me are moot because I can also use force against you. And then you can just scare away any people who try to take away your freedom. And another freedom that we have is protected under the Fourth Amendment. It's protection from warrantless searches and seizures. And it gives you some power and some liberty. It really doesn't give you very much liberty or power. Well, it gives you a lot of, it gives you not so much power, but a lot of liberty. The power that it gives you is that if you were to commit a crime, you might be able to hide the evidence in the time that it would take a police officer to obtain a warrant and then search or seize your property. Which is one reason why people say that we should limit the Fourth Amendment and that right to not be searched and seized. Okay, so this is a great quote from Thomas Jefferson. He who takes a woman gives away his. Oh, whoops, sorry, I apologize. That's the wrong quote. It's those who would give up liberty to gain security deserve neither and will lose both. And so now that we're talking about how and why people would have freedoms taken away or give up their freedoms, it's important to understand that in a historical context, that's very true. So how and why are people's freedoms taken away? Well, one thing is that as a society, it's easier to give away someone else's freedom. Other people's freedom doesn't matter as much, especially if it's a freedom that if you were in their shoes, you wouldn't care much about. So say that tomorrow the government decided that yoga pants and muscle tees would be outlawed. There'd be a lot of rallying against that, saying you can't do that. The government shouldn't be allowed to do that. We oppose this law because a lot of people wear yoga pants, a lot of people wear muscle tees, a lot of people like yoga pants and muscle tees. But if tomorrow there was a law passed that said you can't eat 2 Little Caesars pizza in less than 10 minutes, not as many people would be rallying against that because one, they don't eat Little Caesars pizzas in less than 10 minutes. And also, if someone else that does, they can't really empathize because one, it's someone else that does that, and two, it's not a freedom that they themselves would really enjoy. They don't really care if you should be able to eat 2 Little Caesars pizzas in less than 10 minutes, regardless of whether or not the government really has the right to say that you can or can't do that. And so another way that freedom has been taken away is fear. And there's this fear that of other people having power. And so you say, well, I don't like this person. They don't like the idea that this person might have power over me. They could choose to exercise power over me, and I don't like that idea. I don't think this person is really fit to have this power. And so we decide that we want to have. I'm not going to looking at. I'm just looking at the pictures. And so we have and so we're afraid of other people having power. And so we take the power away from the people that we view as unfit of having it, and we consolidate it onto the people who we view are capable of having this freedom of who we do trust, which can lead to some bad things in a number of ways. And there's a lot of ways that can go wrong. And so now we're going to talk about some examples of how in the past how freedom was taken away and what happened after it was. So probably the most notorious example of an authoritarian state ever probably is the Nazi Party in Germany in the 1930s. And so one of the ways that the Nazi Party was able to establish a authoritarian state that had so much control and took away so much power and liberty from the German people was that it was able to take away firearms. But it wasn't. It started in 1919 with the beginning of the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic was born after 1918 and Germany lost in World War I. And so the Weimar Republic was where the Nazis were able to rise to power. And along the course of that, one of the things that they did was they would target Jews and they would carry out beatings and killings on a much smaller scale than would be carried on later on in the Nazi reign, but were still very terrible. In the Weimar Republic, although Germany at the time was very anti-Semitic, the Weimar Republic decided that they had to protect the Jews, and so they said that only certain people would be allowed to own firearms, and the people who did own them would have to register them. And so the Jews registered their firearms, and the Nazis did. And a lot of the Nazis gave up their firearms, but a lot of them decided just to keep them. And so when the Nazis rose to power and Adolf Hitler was elected as Chancellor of Germany in 1933, one of the first things that he did was look at the registry of all the Jews who owned guns and said, "Oh well, hand those over. You do not fit. You don't deserve this power. I do. The people have elected me, so you're unfit to have this power." Even though the people never really elected him, they changed that. But he viewed these people as unfit of having this power. And so he took that power away from them. He also took away their liberty because he was able to exercise power over the Jews. And another thing that he did was he took away free speech. He silenced the opposition. Anyone who spoke out against him was also by violation of in an unwarranted search and seizure. Anyone who spoke out against the Nazi Party was sent to prison and eventually into concentration camps. Well, I mean, I'll have to learn some more about that. I'm sorry about that stuff. And so, another example of how our freedoms have been taken away, which is a lot more modern, is the Patriot Act. And so, to provide some context, after 9/11, George Bush and the Bush administration decided that in order to better fight terrorism, they should introduce the Patriot Act. So, Patriot is some long acronym. I'm not going to memorize that just for the purposes of this project. But basically, it was limiting of almost every single amendment in the Bill of Rights, with the exception of only the Second and the Third Amendment. And so it went after the First Amendment. You're not allowed to speak out against the government in a certain way. If you are, then you're detained, you're sent to jail. You're not allowed to advocate for terrorism. If you do, you're sent to jail. And so one of the things that's really it's good and bad is that the Second Amendment was largely untouched by the Patriot Act. And it's good that regardless of how you feel about that, it's good that there were people who were willing to take a stand for freedom. It's just bad that it was only for that one particular freedom. We need that kind of militancy towards all freedoms. And this thing can only record 15 minutes. So